Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Dominion Payroll webinar. It is Tuesday, February 2nd. This is our special Groundhog Day edition of the Dominion Payroll webinar. And as such, we'll be talking about some things we've been talking about before, which is stimulus, ERC, and PPP loans, part 2. So it does seem like Groundhog Day sometimes here in webinar land because it's been almost a full year of interpreting legislation out of Washington and discussing how to actually put it into practice. So buckle up today. We're going to start with Kevin talking about, he has about 9 or 10 slides on the stimulus package that President Biden is proposing and also the GOP's sort of cheaper counteroffer. And then Tracy will be continuing her discussion on the ERC and then the second draw of PPP loans. Of course,
I thought you were going to say Quest.
you know what? I almost went in that direction. Her quest. It is kind of a quest. It's definitely a journey. And then we, of course, will take your questions in the Q&A section of your screen. That would be great if you could leave them there, and you can key them in at any time while we're prattling on. And we'll get to them. Sometimes we get to them in the middle. Sometimes we wait to the end. It'll be a surprise. So stick with us. This will probably take 45 minutes today, depending on your questions. And we're also happy to answer questions on topics that aren't here, but we'll do our best to get those answered. If you have been working with us using the email questions@dominionpayroll.com, we appreciate your patience. We've had a really high volume of tickets lately, and rightly so, because it's ERC season. So we are happy to have you here today. My name is Leslie Bruno, and my friends and colleagues are Kevin Wilson and Tracy Clark. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Kevin, what's going on in the Beltway? I so appreciate the fact that you're nerdy enough to be able to just decipher this information for us lay people.
Well, I appreciate that, and I do try to distill it. It's oftentimes feels like a thankless task, because as soon as you feel like you understand something, something shifts in terms of politics, or somebody resigns in Minnesota and all of a sudden the dynamic changes, and what you thought you knew, you don't know anymore.
Right. Well, we appreciate you staying on top of it. And I refer to you as a nerd in the highest possible regard.
And I take it that way. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
Well, let's dive in. So Joe Biden is, 2 weeks into his presidency, and, a flurry of executive orders, and really a sustained push around new economic relief. A lot of the language that we're hearing out of the administration is that they are viewing the pandemic through the lens of a natural disaster rather than one of a recession, which means that they're really looking for, economic relief, but the kind that you would bring to, a community that's been ravaged by a forest fire or a hurricane or an earthquake, rather than, something where you say, oh, well, speculative purchasing in this sector of the economy led to a downgrade in interest rates or something like that. And I think it's just sort of important to point that out, because it does sort of inform how the party in power is thinking of the legislation that they want to get out. So let's dive in. So the Biden administration has put forward a $1.9 trillion relief plan, the American Recovery Act, that they're calling it. And they had a good 7 to 9 days of sort of press time to promote it, to get information out about it. There have been some foot dragging, mostly in the Senate, of Republicans not necessarily wanting to get on board with it, but not really coming up with a counter proposal. And it was just in the last 2 or 3 days where we saw 10 moderate or centrist Republicans come up with a counter proposal, which is less than a third of that $1.9 trillion price tag, comes in at about 618 billion. No, certainly not small potatoes, but a lot smaller than what the administration is calling for. It is really important to point out that number of GOP senators that came up with this counter proposal is 10 of them, with 50 Democrats in the Senate. In order to get any sort of law passed of this nature, you would need 60 votes. So they're coming with 10, saying, hey, if you can get all 50 Democrats on board, we've got the 10 to support this, and trying to demonstrate that they can get a law passed without doing some sort of legislative gymnastics. The Democrats do have the option of going, oh gosh, the term is escaping me right now, but it's a budget review where they would only need the 51 votes, and they may have that, they may not, with Joe Manchin in West Virginia being a little gun shy on this legislation. But there is a route where the Democrats could just push this through and be done with it, and they wouldn't need to bring the Republicans along for a ride. So we'll see what gets negotiated out here. But for today, I'm going to do a fairly quick just walk through what each of the plans have. The thing that always gets the headlines, because it's dollars going into many Americans' bank accounts, are these stimulus checks. It's direct payments to individuals. Biden's plan that gets a fair amount of criticism from folks further left would send $1,400 stimulus checks to individuals. Individuals making less than 75,000 or couples that are filing jointly making under 150,000. The idea of that 1,400 is that combined with the 600 that went out in December, it gets you to that 2,000. And they're saying, that 2,000 was what we campaigned on. And, folks a little further left are saying, hey, you see the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders saying, we need monthly payments of $2,000. Just single one-offs like this are not keeping people, keeping the lights on and all that. There's too much uncertainty. In Biden's plan, dependent children would qualify for $1,400 each as well. And there's some expansion in terms of households that have undocumented individuals would qualify. Dependent adults would come in under this plan. So it's a little bit more expansive than past legislation. The GOP counter proposal knocks that 1,400 down to 1,000. And they are, the thing that you're going to hear from the Republicans is going to be targeted stimulus. That is the drumbeat right now. And rightly so. I think that, there are a lot of individuals on the lower end of the economic spectrum that have borne the brunt of this pandemic. People in frontline work have been disproportionately affected. Minority communities, women in particular, have been hit particularly hard. And so the idea of trying to target the folks that perhaps need the most right now is what a lot of the Republicans are saying. And the dependent children item in the counter proposal would just be $500. And it's not nearly as expansive as what the Democrats would like to see. All right, so for all of our small business friends out there, I think most everybody on this program, Biden's plan wants to allocate $15 billion to create a new grant program for small businesses. This would be separate from the existing PPP, which was renewed, and we'll dive into some details on that later in this program. And then wants to set aside an additional $35 billion. And this would be a loan program at really low rates that would help state, local, tribal, and nonprofit programs that already exist. So it'd just be an infusion of money to go out. And, Democrats are saying, hey, this is a targeted way to use programs that already exist. Let's let's make sure that they're funded so that the wheels are greased and money is flowing. The Republicans are really going to rely on the existing PPP and the economic injury disaster loans, both run through the SBA. And a perennial favorite of the Republicans, $5 million will be set aside to audit and investigate the spending of government money. Something that the accountability factor on PPP is something that they're going to be, bang. I guess I'm using the same metaphor over and over again, but they'll be banging that drum. All right, unemployment. This is really where I think that we can probably see the most negotiating happening and perhaps the most coming together. Biden's plan is a little bit more generous. It would increase jobless benefits to $400 a week. It would extend those benefits. Right now, they go through the end of March. This plan would take those to the end of September. And that end of September date is an important thing. Almost everything in Biden's plan takes existing programs through the end of September. We sort of get the sense that from the administration's perspective, the worst impact of the pandemic hopefully will be alleviated by then. And so if you're really looking for, I don't know, a date to circle in red on your calendar, end of September might be a good one where we see, something that looks a whole lot more like normal kicking around our economy and our communities. Importantly, Biden's plan would also extend the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation and the PUA, pandemic unemployment assistance. Those are two sort of programs that give unemployment benefits to folks that don't normally get covered. These are like freelancers, people in the gig economy, things like that. The GOP counter proposal doesn't go quite as far as September. It would take those benefits just through the end of June. It's going to keep jobless benefits at $300 a week. And it's important, both of these are federal unemployment benefits that would be in addition to anything that you qualify for at the state level. The GOP counterproposal does importantly recognize that the unemployment, call it a patchwork across the country, those state level systems really vary from state to state, and they want to put $2 billion out there to help states sort of spin up their technology, make modernization improvements, and really this is sort of a forward-looking thing to saying, hey, there will be more crises and catastrophes in our future. We don't know when, and it would probably behoove us all to have the best technology in place there. All right, so emergency paid leave. This is a big aspect of the CARES Act and the FFCRA legislation that came through, I can't believe, almost a year ago. But Biden's plan would reinstate the paid sick and family leave. This expired in December. It's voluntary right now. We'll talk about the ERC. I'm sorry. We have talked previously about FFCRA and how those voluntary benefits and tax credits do exist through the end of March. Biden's plan would go ahead and say they're in place and they're all the way through September. It would also extend this benefit pretty much to all employees. If you work in a place that has 500 or more employees, you would qualify for this paid leave, and those under 50 would also qualify. And again, this is just a dollar for dollar tax credit going out to employers for granting paid leave. So we'll see what comes of that. The GOP did not offer anything in the details. Right now they're on a bit of a sort of a press junket and really just trying to get the word out about, hey, we've got an alternative plan, and they haven't really touched on this yet. So let's see, nutrition assistance. This is a little bit further afield from what, I know our small business audience and HR professionals, but I think it's important to point out that, this runs through the Department of Agriculture. The Biden plan would keep an increased amount in food stamp benefits through September, an additional $3 billion to the WIC program, and $1 billion in nutrition assistance to the U.S. territories like Guam, Puerto Rico. The GOP counterproposal says that they're pretty much good with the extended benefits, except no money going to U.S. territories. Not really sure why we're carving off Puerto Rico and Guam and I guess the U.S. Virgin Islands, but GOP is not sending them any extra money. All right, in the schools, this has been a big push, and we're going to hear more and more. Frankly, my kids just went into their second semester, so we're halfway through this school year, and there's going to be a big push for getting kids back into school safely, practically. Really a robust, a large amount of money in the Biden plan, $170 billion being made available for both K through 12 schools, but also colleges and universities. And the strings attached are pretty loose. It's PPE, it's HVAC improvements to buildings. It can also be technology to facilitate remote learning. If you're in a community where it's just not possible to safely get back to school, they really want to provide at least enough dollars to undergird what needs to get done to keep kids learning. So that's important. And it's important to point out that in December, there's something like $83 billion got put into this bucket. So there's already a chunk of change sitting there, and the Biden plan really just wants to supercharge it. The Republican counteroffer is really structured at that K through 12 group of public schools, and just 20 billion. It sounds funny to say just 20 billion, but when it's sitting next to a $170 billion proposal, it does feel somewhat small. All right, so let's see, childcare. All right, so the Biden plan wants to set aside $25 billion in creating an emergency fund to support childcare. This, I really didn't get into the weeds too much on this, but it's sort of an interesting idea. It's something that would maintain its funding so that should future disasters come across our economy, our country, that this fund would exist to support childcare providers. That's an interesting thing, probably worth unpacking a little bit. And then adding an additional $15 billion to existing grant programs. For all of our parents out there, Biden's plan does take a look at the tax code and would love to expand the child care tax credit for 1 year. And so that would allow, so if you look at how much people spend, whether it's on daycare, summer camps, that sort of thing, the child care tax credit, by expanding it for 1 year, it would allow the average parent who's paying for those items to cover half of it through a tax credit. So that would certainly be a boon for parents. And then the child tax credit, just that top line dollars off your income tax. He wants to increase it pretty significantly to $3,600 for children under 6, and $3,000 for children age 6 to 17. So yeah, that is something that you're going to hear a lot about. That is dollars directed straight to parents, and it's something that the administration is going to push pretty hard. The counter proposal from the Republicans, it's $20 billion for child care block grant programs. This is specifically geared towards low-income families. It's people that are working and people that are taking classes and have to pay for childcare. So pretty stark contrast between those two proposals there. And that's where the details run thin on the GOP counterproposal. But there, when you've got a $1.9 trillion law that you're floating, there's a lot out there. It's sort of amazing that I've talked this long and I'm only now getting to the $15 federal minimum wage, but that is a big part of this push in Biden's plan. Right now that push does look like it'll be a, if they are able to get the votes on this and push it through, it would be an incremental thing. It wouldn't be, next Tuesday, everybody, the minimum wage is up to 15. It'd probably be 15 an hour. I think the earliest I saw was 2024. It's most likely 2025. Biden's he's going to reopen the ACA health insurance marketplace for a period of time. And he's really pushing to increase subsidies for health insurances that you purchase there. He wants to put $20 billion towards veterans' health needs. All right, this top line, $350 billion for state and local governments. That is going to be a big fight between Democrats and Republicans. That was one of the big sticking points in previous economic relief. And it's just important to point out that the Constitution of the United States requires state governments to have balanced budgets. It doesn't require it of the federal government. So in order for states to comply with that, they're at a position right now, given the erosion of their tax base, to start cutting critical services. And so we're already starting to see, police and firefighters take hits, community theater for sure. But then there's things like snowplows and, plumbing and all the infrastructure stuff that goes into state and local budgets. Democrats really want to shore that up and make it a little bit easier. And the Republican talking point on that is largely that they need to be fiscally responsible and work their way out of it. So yeah, that expect to see a fight in Congress on that. And then lastly, it is sort of important to point out that we are still in a pandemic, and $160 billion of Biden's plan would go towards be about $20 billion towards vaccines, and another $140 billion would be additional testing, hiring. They're estimating they need to hire 100,000 individuals to help administer vaccines, and renting sites all around the country, using everything from the National Guard to NASCAR and football stadiums to just get people shots in the arm. So a big chunk of change there. And lastly, just to point out, about $30 billion in this plan would go towards rental and utility assistance and extend the eviction moratorium, and I think the mortgage foreclosure moratorium through September. So that is a long-winded look at what $1.9 trillion could possibly buy you. I think just in summary, the Democrats have a path through budget reconciliation to pass this without a single vote from the Republicans. I don't think that they politically really want to do that right now and would love to figure out a way to get to 60 votes in the Senate to make it happen. But I also think that they feel that they just got a mandate from the people and a mandate to lead. And I think that they are in a very strong place to, negotiate or not, get what they want. So I think that time is of the essence and that we're going to see a big push in the next week or two to see something happen. And let's just remember that we're still in the midst of, approving jobs within the Senate. We're also trying to figure out the cabinet appointees, and there's going to be an impeachment trial in the Senate. I think it starts next week, next Tuesday. So a lot of business happening in the upper chamber of the Congress. A lot going on there, and we will keep you posted as these details continue to develop. Leslie and Tracy, that is my long-winded monologue. I'm going to take a drink of water.
Take some water, Kevin.
Thank you.
We do have a question from our friend Jane on this topic that I think we could probably go ahead and answer if you don't mind.
Sure.
Jane asks, can folks just keep drawing unemployment endlessly without looking for work? So many places where I am are hiring. Also, any idea why Congress doesn't push for more jobs creation? Surely there are jobs people could do to support COVID strategies, food distribution, infrastructure, etc.
Jane, great question. Let's see. I'm going to try and make sure that I'm unpacking all that. I know that at the beginning of the pandemic, the unemployment, the requirement to show that you were looking for work was removed, and I don't think that that's been added back in. So as of right now, I think so much of the focus is on keeping people, frankly, socially distanced. And so rather than saying, hey, you have to go out and you have to knock doors and fill out applications, we want you to, collect your check and stay safe. Don't get sick. Don't spread COVID. I think that, there's always a push for that kind of work requirement out of the GOP. It's not something that Democrats really fight too hard against. So I think that, if we really see these numbers and hospitalizations and deaths continue to drop, as we've seen in the last week, if that's really, a sustained trend, then, I think that may well be something that gets negotiated out. And in terms of the job creation, just a personal anecdote, I think that that infrastructure is something that is low-hanging fruit in the U.S. economy, and jobs could be created from Alaska to Florida if we invested in that. And I think sort of an ongoing joke in the Trump administration was next week is infrastructure week. It never really happened, but I've got fingers crossed that we do see an infrastructure bill. It's got tremendous support in the American people and bipartisan support in the Congress. And so it seems like one of those things where if we could just knock some heads together, we might actually get a bill out of them. So that's my hope. I hope I answered the question as best I could there.
And Mike has a comment. He says, it's unfortunate that a minimum wage of $15 for many parts of the country will cause numerous businesses to close.
Yeah, it is a tough, it's a tough nut to crack. And I think that, depending on which economist you ask on which day, you get different answers. The Republican counter proposal that you hear in sort of academic settings is to break out the country into regions and say, $10 in Arkansas is really different than $10 in Manhattan. And that seems to be the Republican counter proposal to a nationwide one. And Democrats just aren't hearing it. It's been, I think it's been 12 years, since the last increase in the minimum wage. And it was a pretty small one last go round. And I hear you, Mike. It's a tough thing. And particularly if you're looking at paying people $7-8 an hour right now, and the idea of doubling that, that's really tough for employers. So I think that the policy conversation has to go beyond just that minimum wage. There's got to be more nuanced discussion about, it's got to be a more nuanced discussion about how we support small businesses and growth and job creation and all of those things, while also moving people towards a sustainable and living wage. And I don't know. I don't have all the answers today. Maybe next time, though.
Why not, Kevin?
I'm just out of breath. That's all.
Okay. All right. Why don't we let Tracy jump in and talk about and switch gears for a minute and let you take a break. Tracy.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
How's your
So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the employee retention credit and what we're doing at Dominion Payroll. So if you reached out to me about the employee retention credit, I sent out the survey for this program to see if you qualified. If you didn't get a survey from us, you can still fill it out, and I'm going to show you where it is on our website. So if you'll go to the next slide. Okay, so it's located on our client landing page. If you go over to the quick links, you'll see new employee retention credit program survey. And if you click on that, it'll take you to a little blurb about the Employee Retention Credit Program. And then you'll also be able to see the actual survey. And I'm actually going to share my screen. So if you'll go to the next slide, I think I have on there that I'm going to do the survey. Yeah, so can I share my screen from here? Okay, great, thank you. Let's see. Two. Okay. All right. Are you able to see that?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. All right. So if you click on that link for the survey, this is what you're going to see. And basically, it'll give you a little description of the actual program. It tells you about how we can help you. And then it just talks about the survey itself. So over here, you'll see, just put in your company name, the company code, your full name and address, and your phone number. That's because I will probably be reaching back out to you just to clarify and make sure that we have the dates correct to be able to apply it. So that would be my way of being able to contact you quickly and easily. Basically, it's going to ask you about the two different programs because ERC actually covers now both 2020 for PPP recipients and also 2021. So the first thing you're going to see is, does your company meet the 2020 eligibility for ERC? And there's actually two criteria that you can qualify. You don't have to have both, just one of them is fine. The first one is about being fully or partially suspended. Now, it says because of a governmental order that limited commerce, travel, or group meetings due to COVID-19 in a manner that prevents the employer from operating at a normal capacity. This does also include businesses that use other businesses that had to be closed. So maybe you didn't have to be closed, but the businesses that you supply did, or your supplier had to be closed. So in other words, if you were, let's say you were a supplier to restaurants and all the restaurants had to be closed, but you didn't, you're still going to be grandfathered in under this eligibility about being fully or partially shut down. Same would be true if you were a manufacturer and let's say you weren't required to be shut down. However, a business that supplied a raw material to you was shut down. So again, you'd be grandfathered in. The other criteria is a gross decline in, or excuse me, a decline in your gross receipts. You have to be down 50% for one quarter in 2020 as compared to 2019 to qualify. So for instance, let's say in quarter two, you were down 50%. In quarter three, you weren't down 50%, maybe you're down only 30%. And then eventually, you know, go to fourth quarter and you're down maybe like 25%. You're still gonna qualify. You qualify first with the quarter that's 50% down, but you don't unqualify for ERC until you reach a number that's less than 20% down. So you have to be above 80% of what you would have been in 2019. You're also asked about your 2019 full-time employee count because a lot of the way this program works is based on the number of employees that you have. So if you have 100 or less, and this is for ERC 2020, if you have 100 or less full-time employees, and a full-time employee is someone who works 30 hours, averages 30 hours a week. So part-timers don't count in this. This is just your full-time employees. If you have 100 or less, all wages paid, once you've determined that you're eligible, all wages paid are eligible for the ERC program. If you have more than 100, then only the wages that you paid to employees for not working. In other words, like a paid furlough. Healthcare is also included in this. So once you've determined that you actually are eligible, the way it works is this: you would get back 50% of the eligible wages that you paid to your employees up to $10,000 in eligible wages. So in other words, long story short, you get a maximum of $5,000 per employee. So take whatever you've paid them of those eligible wages and take 50% of that up to $5,000. And that, again, that includes their health costs as well. You can't, there is one thing about the PPP You can't use the wages that you allocated to PPP to also be included in the ERC program. So you have to take those out. So in other words, maybe you only got your PPP loan on, let's say, April 16th, but you had to be shut down prior to that. So the program began on 3/13. So if you were shut down at, maybe you're shut down on 3/17 or 3/18, all the way up until the point you received your PPP funds, those wages would be eligible for the ERC program. And then when you are out of PPP money, if you're still eligible, you pick right back up with ERC all the way until 12/31/2020. And that's 2020. When you get to 2021, things changed a little bit. So what they did on December 27th was to expand this program. They've made it go through the end of June. They have expanded the threshold for employees. So instead of the threshold being 100, it's now 500. So all wages paid to employees are eligible for the ERC program if your company is eligible. They also changed the eligibility a little bit. So it still has the fully or partially shut down. So a lot of restaurants and gyms and places like that are still qualifying under that criteria, but the gross decline in receipts criteria has been changed to a decline of 20% over a corresponding quarter of 2019. So you don't even have to use 2020. You can go all the way back to 2019. Right now, it's just a guessing game because some people won't know if they qualify until they get closer to the end of the first quarter. But if you're, pretty confident, hey, we've lost a bunch of contracts and we're pretty sure we're going to be down at least 20%, then you may already know that you qualify for this. So they also changed the amount that is available. So in 2021, they made it 70% of eligible wages and healthcare. So up to $7,000 per employee. So then now you're going to take their eligible wages and you're going to multiply that by 70%. And that's going to be per quarter. So previously it was a max of 5,000 for the whole year of 2020. Now it's a max of 7,000 for each quarter in 2021. I know it sounds confusing and I'm happy to talk with you about it if you think, wow, we might qualify for that, but I'm not sure and I just need to talk it out with somebody. I'm happy to give you my best advice. I also encourage you to talk to your CPA about it because it can be a lot of funds that you could get back as a refund. In 2020, I'm processing those as a refund because you've already paid those taxes. And in fact, if you've already reached out to me, I am working on that list and I have already started processing yesterday. So you'll be getting emails from me when I'm working on your ERC credits for 2020. 2021 hopefully will be in place very, very soon. We will do a catch up, and for those of you who qualified on January 1st, we'll do a catch up to make you current with your credits. And I think that does it on the retention credit. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Perfect. Okay. So payroll protection, or excuse me, yeah, payroll protection plan report. So a lot of people have been writing in saying, hey, we're applying for our second loan. What do we need from you guys? And from us, you're going to use that CARES Paycheck Protection Program report. So you'll navigate to reporting and then client reports. And then in the little search bar, you're going to put CARES and filter. You'll get all these different, or you could get all these different reports. And the one you're going to want is that CARES Paycheck Protection Program report. And it's a date range report. Once you click on that, you're going to see that you'll have some filtering, grouping, and options come up. And what you want to do is you're going to put in your from date and your to date. And SBA has asked that you use 12 months. So you can use a trailing 12 months. So now that it's February, you could use, February of last year to February of this year. Or you can use 2019 data, or you can use 2020 data, but you'll go ahead and put in, most people are using their 2019 data because that's where they have their most payroll. But if you don't, if that was 2020, then that's what you want to use. Put in your legal company if you have more than one. If you don't, it's just going to default to the one. If you have termed companies, you need data, you need data to get a PPP loan. You can use that include termed companies checkbox there. Otherwise, it'll give you a 0 if you're a termed company. Under options, you want to leave it at 100,000 excess cost option to compensation only. It's going to limit the amount of compensation that those people get. So if you have somebody who's making 174,000, it's going to cut them back to just 100,000. And you'll see that. I'm going to show you the report in just a minute. The FTE calculation method, it's going to be on hours paid. There is another option there on where you can do it on like whether or not an employee is full-time or part-time, because some people don't use the hours paid method for doing their FTE. So that's a way that you can have that show up. And then finally, the format needs to be in Excel. It does default to PDF, but you're going to need it in Excel. Okay, I need to share my screen again. Sorry. All right, so I have a report pulled up and I want you to look at this. So when you run the CARES Paycheck Protection Program report, what you're going to see is you're going to see the date range that you chose. You're going to see your current active employees. You'll see your average FTE count. You'll see, and I see here there's no average FTE count there. And that's because there weren't any hours put in, and that's fine. That's totally fine. You're going to see the 12-month total cost, then you're going to see a monthly cost, and then the report is going to give you an estimate of your loan. So if you fall under the 2.5, that's going to be here in column K, and if you fall under the 3.5, that's going to be in L. And then if you scroll over some more, it's going to just show you the different months and what the totals were in those months. So you'll have all that detail. Under employee details, what you're going to see is you're going to see each of your employees, and you're going to see their hire date, their fire date, their status. Then you're going to see what their gross wages were. If they used any of the COVID times, those will be there as well because they have to be excluded. And then you're going to see gross less COVID, any excess pay. If you have somebody who's earning, like I said, over 100,000, you see that they've been capped at 100,000. If we paid any taxes on their behalf, that will be here. If we track your health, that will be here. Same with retirement. Then you're going to see the total payroll cost, and then the average monthly cost for that employee. And then you can see each of the months will be broken down for each employee separately. Under the earnings detail tab, now this one has a ton of different earnings. You probably won't have this many. Maybe you'll have, 6 to 10 different kinds of earnings, but you'll see like hourly, regular, all the different kinds of earnings will be listed here. And you can see what's been allocated towards that for each of the months. And then your employee hours paid, that's where you would see if you had any hours paid out and how the FTEs were calculated. So that's the report kind of in a nutshell. It has pretty much everything that you're going to need for your bank. All right, I think that wraps me up.
Okay, sorry, I was multitasking. Here I am. Okay, we have a couple questions. One of them is, I'm going to skip one real quickly. He says, I'm online on my Dominion portal and can't find the survey. Can you direct us to it again?
Yeah, so it should be under quick links on your client landing page. It's usually the page that you log in on. And you should see,
So they need to click on quick links for it to show up.
yeah, no, quick links is right there on the landing page, and you'll see it listed underneath of that. I think it's the top one. It was when I looked earlier. The other thing is, I'm almost positive that we have it on the on our Dominion payroll site. Let me just look really quickly. I think it's on our COVID page, but I'll look real quick and make sure.
For those of you who have not been to our COVID page in a while, we have cleaned it up. So it got a little stale. So Tracy and Isabel and I took a look at it a couple weeks ago. It's now a bit more streamlined and up to date. So we appreciate your patience on that.
Yep. Yeah, I don't see it there. Let me look here.
We can probably
Nope. Yeah, I'll get it posted on our website, but it is on the it should be on the landing page under quick links.
Okay. Michelle has a multi-part question. She says, number one, if we decide to do the ERC calculation ourselves and have Dominion Payroll file the amended return, what information do we need to provide to you? Is it just the total amount of the credit for each affected quarter?
Yes. Yep.
All right, that was easy. Question two, can we take the credit on partial pay periods? For example, we were shut down on March 16th and received our PPP loan on April 24th. We had a pay period of April 16th through April 29th, paid on May 5th. Can we take the credit on wages paid between April 16th and April 24th? If so, is there a report that we can run to get this partial pay, or do we need to do a manual calculation?
So Michelle, from what I'm reading, I believe it goes on the pay dates. So you take the eligible range and you see which paid dates were within that range. I believe that's how the ERC works. From what I've read, that's what I'm coming up with.
Okay.
So I guess my answer is no to the partial pay.
Mike says, this is a really nice report. Nice job. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. And he says, my bank took it and approved it in minutes.
Wonderful.
So that's good. We like to hear positive bank anecdotes.
Definitely. I also think that childcare is eligible for ERC because I believe they had to be shut down. And I know that, well, yeah, they definitely are, because I think they have like rules where you have to have one teacher for every 10 kids or something. I believe they're still under a shutdown. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, Mike.
I'm sure he will. Catherine has a question. Speaking of our website, there was a document on the website called Forgiveness Report, and it explained how to generate and what each piece of the report meant. It has old information, like that 75% needs to be used for employee pay. Is there something more current? I'm generating the 8-week and 24-week reports to see what looks better as I prepare to apply for forgiveness, but I don't know the requirements. Thank you for the help.
Catherine, I'll take a look at that. I thought that they had updated that. I will look into that. Thank you for letting us know. But if you're unsure, it's 60% has to be used for employee pay or payroll. I should say payroll costs, because it's not just employee pay. So that would also include your retirement and your health care. But yeah, let me look. I'll take a look at the university and see what's out there.
Yeah, and that 60%, Catherine, is the minimum.
Yep.
You could spend more than that on payroll costs, but it has to be at least 60. Okay, and Mike followed up and said that was true, but it has been lifted. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, it's the FTE requirements that I'm unsure of. Okay, so on the report, On the FTE, it'll tell you whether you have a, whether you're meeting the 100% headcount retention or not. If you don't, there are two safe harbors. The very first one is that you were unable to meet those FTE requirements because you're under a mandate. So for instance, let's say you were a restaurant and they said, you know, you can only be at 50% capacity and you don't need all those employees when you're only operating at 50%. Then in that case, you fall under that safe harbor number 1. So someplace like a concert venue would also qualify under safe harbor number 1. A childcare facility would qualify under safe harbor number 1. Anything that was required to be shut. And so that in that case, you don't have to worry about the fact that your FTEs during the reference period don't meet your FTEs during the loan period. The other one is safe harbor number 2, and safe harbor number 2 basically said that if you had a certain number of FTEs during your reference period, but you don't meet it during your loan period, but you're able to show that you brought all your FTEs back by the 31st of December, then you meet safe harbor number 2. Now, that one also came with this strange little caveat where the reduction in headcount had to occur between February 15th and April 26th. So if you, for some reason, you didn't reduce your headcount then, you actually reduced it later, you don't qualify for safe harbor number 2. It's a very, I don't know why they made it that way, but that was how the safe harbor number 2 works. So that's the 2 safe harbors for FTEs. The other thing is that if you have exceptions, so if you're going through your list and there's a place that I normally look, I go to the employee loan details page. And if you scroll all the way over to the end of that page, you'll see 2 columns. One is going to show you the FTEs during the loan period, and the other one will show you the FTEs during the reference period that was chosen for you by the report. I kind of go through that and I look at the employees. Like, for instance, if I'm looking and during the reference period, I have an employee who was a 1 and now they're a 0.3. Then what I normally do is like scroll back over, look at this person's name, go into the system, kind of check out their pay history and see what happened. And you may right away look at that and say, oh, you know what, they were out on FMLA. Well, if they're out on FMLA, that's an exception. Maybe you scroll down and you see another one, you know, same situation. They're less than they were during the reference period. And you're like, oh, I remember now, this person was terminated. That's also an exception. You move down another one, oh, that person retired. That's also an exception. Basically, if the reason that an employee is less of an FTE during your loan period than they were during your reference period, due to their action, they are an exception. Now, if you don't have work for them, that's not their action that's causing the reduction in FTE. That's actually is a reduction in FTE that belongs to you. But if you have an employee that, you know, maybe they had to go serve in the military, they resigned, they passed away, they were terminated for cause, they went on disability, they asked for reduced hours. All of those things are employee actions that cause them to be a reduction in your FTE. So in those cases, you can put them in as an exception. And what that does is it will reflect in the report, their FTE will reflect the same value that it was during the reference period. So if they used to be a 1, they become a 1. If they used to be a 0.5, they become a 0.5. So that's how the exceptions work. And I'm happy if you want to reach out to me through questions@dominionpayroll.com. I'm happy to help you set that up. And I am going to look at the university also about that document.
Okay, she says that was very helpful. That was a
Might
nice,
have been too much information. I know it was it was a lot.
that was a nice review of the FTE requirement, though. I haven't heard that in a couple months, so it's a flashback. Groundhog Day.
That's right.
Okay, everybody, we have a couple more minutes. Now's the time. If you have a burning question, please type it in. If not, you can always find us at questions@dominionpayroll.com. We know there's a lot going on, and there was a lot in this presentation today. We will have it posted on our website on the COVID page by close of business today. So it'll be both the slides and the audio recording. And so you'll be able to see this one today, as well as all of the other webinars that we've done listed on that page.
And if somebody would, if one of our clients wouldn't mind going out to their landing page and seeing if they see that link for ERC, I think it says, it does say the employee retention credit. I just want to make sure that people are able to see that and able to click on it.
All right, well, perhaps somebody will do that while I
you
do a
oh yay, hooray.
shameless plug for tomorrow. Okay, Teresa says they can see the survey.
Good.
Brigitte says, if we have filled out the survey already, how will we communicate the exact dates we use PPP?
Brigitte, I just reached out to you. I think I've just sent you an email because I'm actually working on yours. That's the one that I'm working on right now. So let me see if I'm like in the middle of trying to, I think I sent it already. But yeah, it's Brigitte, please. Yeah, I did. I sent you an email already this morning about the exact dates.
Nice. And Stacy Main confirms that she can see the ERC link.
Awesome. That's great. Perfect.
Brigitte says, thank you. All right. I love it when loops get closed.
Me too.
So many are open right now. It's nice to have a few closed. Thank you, Tracy. That was great. Real quick, wanted to remind everybody that we have a webinar tomorrow. The HR Matters series returns, excuse me, for another look at vaccines in the workplace. I know that I've covered this topic before, but it continues to be a hot topic among my clients. So we're going to have Kim Alexander from Mammoth join me again, and we're going to talk through whether or not you should have a policy, whether that policy should be mandatory or optional, and what are some of the considerations around that decision, and then touching on what we have touched on before, but it bears repeating, what you are allowed to ask, what you're not allowed to ask, and other types of guideposts that the EEOC have put around the vaccine. So tune in tomorrow at 11 for that topic, and get yourself educated. Even if the vaccine is not available yet to your employees, it would be good to get prepared and be ready for when it is, so that you can have your ducks in a row and get your questions answered. So we'll see you tomorrow at 11. Let's see, do we have another question here? Hazel says she sees the link as well. Thank you, Hazel. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Kevin and Tracy.
Yep, you bet. It was awesome. Bye.
Take care, y'all.